Hello, everybody. I hope that you are all doing well. Thank you so much for coming. I think we've got about 16 folks on the line with us. Yeah, thanks so much for being here. My name is Stephanie Hughes, and I am the Atlantic Canada Regional Program Manager for a project called the Bauta Family Initiative on Canadian seed security. We as a group run kind of coast to coast programming in Canada to support farmers who are doing work to increase the quality, quantity, and diversity of seed that they grow, select, breed, share, and sell. So we've been around for about 10 years. Our website is seedsecurity.ca. And we're really pleased this year to be working closely with Niki and Ian of NIKIAN Farm, who are doing some really fantastic work with paddy rice in Nova Scotia. So we're here virtually, obviously, because we could not manage to get together in person because of the weather. We tried a couple of different dates and it was just too wet to make that feasible, especially for kind of a live demo of the rice harvest. So it's unfortunate that we are not currently on Niki and Ian's beautiful farm, but thank goodness for Zoom, we at least have this. Niki and Ian are the founders and farmers of NIKIAN Farm in Granville Beach, Nova Scotia. As far as I can gather, NIKIAN Farm really grew from their efforts to create a sort of self-sustaining oasis in Nova Scotia, having relocated here from the West Coast. If you've ever been to their farm, and I know at least some of you have, I mean, it is just a gorgeous place, dripping with biodiversity and life. They do ornamentals and vegetables, plant breeding and selection, seed sales, perennials. And in the time that I've gotten to know them, I know them to be constant experimenters with agroecological methods and the different kinds of crops that they like to grow and experiment with, as well as really passionate advocates for community food security and community seed security. And so today we're going to be talking about their rice, which is an incredible example of this work that they do. So I'm going to turn it over to Niki and Ian. And I'm really excited to have you guys here. Thank you for being so flexible in terms of the format in which you're sharing your knowledge with us.
Great. Thanks. Thanks for the intro, Steph. That's very flattering. We're thrilled that there's so many people who are interested, and we hope you've had a chance to look at the video, which probably answered some questions and brought up many more. So I think we'll just throw it open and let people ask the questions that they have about anything they saw in the video or beyond that, and we'll try to answer your questions. And if you don't pummel us with questions, we'll ask Steph to come up with some, because I know she has some. So go ahead and ask.
Let me get started then. If no one else is picking it. This is Calvin. I'm across the river in Centerlee on the south side of the Annapolis River. And I was very keen to see the machinery that you had in China. That machinery costs and how well it's worked for you, etc.
Okay, Calvin. I think all of our equipment cost us around $10,000. That's the little mini combine, I think, was a couple thousand. The rice polisher was the most expensive piece of equipment. I think that was around $5,000. And then there were some other sundry bits and pieces. And then, of course, importation and shipping and everything rounded up to about $10,000. So not a real big outlay of funds. The biggest problem or the biggest challenge I had was trying to deal with the Chinese manufacturers who had never exported one of their machines to Canada before. And so that was a bit of a challenge. And also not really knowing because there's thousands of manufacturers of rice equipment in China, and not knowing really how good the equipment was going to be until it arrived. pretty much it worked fine. It's still working fine. It's not up to my standards of workmanship, but at least I have a machine that does the job, and the polisher works really well. We saw similar polishers down in Vermont when we went there for the seminar, and they had the wheels, and they had bicycle dehuskers, bicycle driven dehuskers. I mean, there were lots of people experimenting with all kinds of different homemade machines. A dehusker, that's a set of wheels that the grain passes through. It has 3 wheels. They're hard rubber. They're set at a very small tolerance of I forget how many millimeters, but it's just about the size of a grain of rice. And as the rice is fed through this maze of wheels, it just cracks the husk, and then there's a fan that blows the husks in one direction, and then the brown rice grains come out the bottom. And other than occasionally I have to adjust it, it gives me no problems. That's all I can say.
There's a question that came in the chat from Flora. And Flora says, it doesn't look like your rice is in water, is it? And so maybe I had the same observation watching the video. Maybe you guys could explain a bit about your paddies.
Okay, the paddies were flooded up until 2 weeks before the allotted time to harvest. And this is generally, once your rice has matured, then you drain the paddies for harvest. This year we had we had rice. There was lots of water in those paddies. They were up to my ankles, but we had enough, I suppose, biomass underneath the rice plants that you really couldn't notice it. But generally, when you dry down the paddies, it's bone dry. But this year was another issue. Yeah. If you notice in the video, those star-pointed wheels on the combine would be the only thing that could get through those paddies. Normal tractor wheels would just stall out, spin out.
Perhaps just a quick follow-up to that. I know there are upland or dryland rice varieties available. Lots of people sell them in Canada. Why did you go for paddy rice, which seems to have so many more kind of environmental complexities to them?
Well, basically, when we first started out 10 years ago, the only person that was giving any sort of seminars or instruction on growing rice was a man named Akiogi in Vermont, and he was working with Cornell University to do some experimenting in paddy rice. So that's the only thing we knew at the time. Upland rice, I think, works good if you've got of a big enough area, but again, you've got weed management issues. You've got, there's Russian Dvorskin is a rice. That's an upland dry rice. I think there's lots of upland dry rices. I just don't know how you would keep your weed load down, and how do you fertilize once you've set your seeds, because in paddy rice you have to fertilize 3 times. And rice is a real nitrogen hog. It loves its nitrogen, like any lawn. This just is a wet lawn.
Awesome. Okay, we have a couple of questions about equipment, but before that, I'm wondering maybe a follow-up question from Flora. How deep can the rice be planted? They say, I have a pond with bulrushes. Could I grow rice in there?
The problem with planting in a pond, is that you're going to have more weed than you're going to have rice. This is something we're starting to learn at the moment, is that perhaps you want to build your rice paddy above your pond, use your pond as a source of flooding water, and that will cut down on your weed load, because the bulrushes and everything are going to try to colonize your rice paddy over time if the rice paddy doesn't get to dry out bone dry for a period.
Yeah, I think it would be very hard to actually drain your pond to harvest. When we're planting our rice, our seedlings are only about 10 centimeters tall. So that means we're planting in just an inch or two of water, just enough to tuck them into the mud. It'd be very hard to have a plant big enough to plant it in any depth, any real depth. They grow quickly after they're planted, but to start with, they're quite short.
Okay. And a question from Steph about fertilization. What do you fertilize your paddy with?
I use an OMRI certified chicken litter that I can get from Scotia Gold,
Pellets.
and they're a pelletized form.
Chicken.
And I bought a ton of it 5 or 6 years ago, and I'm still using it because my paddies are relatively small, and the stuff, once you throw it into the paddies, it just dissolves, and the rice has immediate access to it. We're completely organic, so that was the only option we had.
I also find it useful to put it in pots, in my pots of whatever I'm growing. It's a nice sort of slow release organic fertilizer to, carry a plant over the growing season. So I'm working away at that ton of chicken litter pellets. I think we'll have it for years.
Do you do that kind of mostly just at the beginning of the season? Do you do it multiple times throughout your growing season?
In the rice paddy, it's 3 times. You start off, you fertilize it before you plant. Then once it starts to tiller, which sending up stalks, and then when it starts to head up and starts to set seed. So there's the regime is 3 times, and then once you had your third fertilization, then it's just let the rice go. And once it's fully mature, then you drain the pond or drain the paddy back to the pond. So we try to have a closed loop system, so we're not sending excess water or fertilizer down into the marsh.
That's right. Yeah, and you don't lose it either because you can then use it the following season by filling the paddy back up. Gotcha. Okay, let's get into some of these equipment questions. Steph at Twisted Brook is here. She's got lots of questions about your equipment. So I'll just read the comment as is. Was it difficult to find the machinery? How did you know where to look? Very interested in the walk behind combine. Is it able to be adjusted to harvest other crops like beans, oats, or mustard? And if you don't mind sharing, what was the cost? So if you guys activate your chat, you can see those and take them one at a time if you like. But just some questions about the equipment that you demonstrated on video.
Who wants to go? You?
Go ahead.
Okay, Steph, the combine 10 years ago, or no, I guess it was about 6-7 years ago. I think it was around 2,000, 2,500 landed here. It needed some assembly, but basically it came in pretty good shape. I think I've seen it used on different upland grains other than rice, oats, barley, rye. It doesn't have you can't change the screens on this thing, unfortunately. So sometimes you get a lot of stalks in with your seed. That's an adjustment on the airflow. It has a fan that sucks the seed up into the bag, and then the threshing system kicks out most of the chaff. And it's a learning experience. It took me a while to figure out how to adjust the airflow, but I've got it down now pretty well. I'm looking forward. I've harvested winter rye, for a neighbor, and it worked really well. It was about an acre. I'm still feeding the chickens that particular grain, but you can use it. I don't know about mustard or some of the smaller seed, but I know anything that's roughly the size of a grain of rice will work fine. It's a multi-purpose combine. It just doesn't have a way to change screens.
What about something like a bean that would be considerably bigger? Would that gum it up, or?
I don't know if the airflow, I just really don't know. I haven't tried it. I think if you look on, I looked at Alibaba, in the Chinese website they have for selling products. The Japanese,
Really?
the Chinese have, or the Japanese sell equipment, but it's way out of my price range because it's a much higher quality. But I'm sure if you find, if you look on Alibaba and you find a rice, combine, you can ask. A lot of them have good support, and you can ask them, can I use it for beans? Can I use it for whatever? And they might even adjust the screen size for you. I really don't know. Like I said, I was so focused on rice. I'm still working on getting that right.
Awesome. That's fascinating. Okay, follow-up question. I do invite you guys. I know I'm reading questions out from the chat, but I really do invite you to unmute and jump in if you'd like to ask your questions yourselves. If you're not comfortable, that's fine, but I'm always keen to talk less. Quick follow-up on fertilizer from Calvin. Do you use, is it the same pelletized chicken manure for all 3 applications?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought.
I have a question.
Great, go for it.
We're going to be first timers this spring, and we will be having a 10.5 by 14 foot paddy. And so obviously we're going to be harvesting by hand. So when I was watching Niki cut this on the video, she chops it off with the sickle. So what do you do with what's left, the stalk and the roots? Do you, till that under for next year, or do you go around and pull it all out and toss it?
I till it back in.
Okay.
I mean, I leave it over the winter, and then the winter breaks it down, and then just use a little rotor, because your paddy is going to be relatively dry once you've drained it. Then just rototill it and plant. Some farmers, rice farmers, will leave the stalks and plant in between the old stalks.
Oh.
The following year.
Oh, okay. Why would they do that?
Well, if they don't have a rototiller, or any mechanical devices, it's a lot easier just to let the stalks rot in place and just replant in between.
Okay.
You guys will be planting about 200 rice plants, I suspect.
Yep, probably.
Yeah. Follow-up question to that: if you do it by hand, the minimum amount of equipment you have to purchase would probably be the polisher.
Well, I would prefer, the polisher is expensive. So up until, I've always thought we could do a cooperative where I have the polisher, and that was the most expensive part of all the tools I bought. And I'd be more than happy if people came and polished the rice here. And
that would be great. Yeah,
that was our intent originally, was to do a cooperative, cooperatively use the combine, cooperatively use the rice polisher, that way. That's the way I grew up in Wilmot. One farmer had a combine, and he did everybody's fields, and everybody got a little, he got something for his trouble. But that, I think, makes the most sense, rather than everybody having their own machine.
Oh, good. So you'll take lemon jelly?
Oh yes, indeed. No barter.
No barter.
Okay. Sounds good. Got more question?
Here's Catherine Winlow has a question. Dryland rice. Can one fertilize with compost tea as amendments with the growing season if multiple fertilizations needed? What do you think about?
Whoa. Well, it depends on how much nitrogen your compost tea is going to have, because rice is a nitrogen hog. It loves nitrogen. And if you go on the IRRI website, that's the International Rice Research Institute in the Philippines, they have all kinds of information available for free. You can download, you can print their booklets. I have several, and I'm absolutely amazed at the amount of nitrogen that they use for growing the rice on the Asian side. They're using chemical fertilizer, of course, and so a good 60% of that it gases off before the plants even see it. So that's a little bit, unfortunate. But you could do compost tea, but I mean, I don't know how much you want to do on a dry land. That's dry land rice generally means a rather large area. Excuse me, I have a dog.
Deal with crisis.
It has a lot to say
I'm
about
thinking-
rice cultivation.
Yeah, I'm thinking a compost tea made with alfalfa pellets might be a good nitrogen source that could be
Compost tea.
put on a dry land rice
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah. Huh, that's a really good idea.
Well, it's all experiments.
Earn as you learn.
Mhm.
Can you talk about, this question is from Kelvin, can you talk about your CV selection of the Japanese cultivar?
The Japanese cultivar was the Hayayuki, and that's one we've been growing now for several years. And it's from Hokkaido Island, so it's northern Japanese, and it was developed for their short season cold area. So we're at the same latitude. It was something that the rice farmers in the northeast of the US were quite fond of, and that was one of the ones we were anxious to get as soon as we could. And it's a good, stable rice. It always performs well. I don't know what else to say about it. We use a lot of Hayayuki rice.
You've been growing that one for several seasons, you said. Have you been selecting for anything particular as you go along?
Not really with the Hayayuki. I think the first time we grew it was 2008. And it was, we were just really impressed with the quality, and it's just really a reliable rice. So when we started, the only rice we could import, the only rice seed we could import because of the Canadian Food Inspection restrictions was rice from China. And so we went through seed banks looking for rice from China that was also cold tolerant and short season, and came up with several varieties, which we ordered then through IRI, the International Rice Research Institute in the Philippines. We had to go through phytosanitary permission and all sorts of limitations. Now, all of those restrictions are off. You can order rice from anywhere. You can bring it in across the border. There's no limitations. So I just encourage you to look for rice anywhere that you think would be a good rice. We also grow an Akamuro red, which is a Japanese rice. And that's a lovely rice. It really is red. It's red in the seed. It's red in the cooking. And I don't know, we probably have several other Japanese rice and Chinese and Italian. So there's rice all over the world, and it's worth experimenting with to find what you really like.
Since we're on the topic of varieties, I know that you were doing some trials this year on the farm, thinking about climate change and changing conditions that you're seeing, more complex maintenance issues with your paddy. Could you talk a little bit about the trials that you were doing, what you were comparing, what you were looking for?
This year, we're growing Hayayuki out just to make sure our seed stays viable. We also chose to grow a Chinese variety, Kudwani, for the same reason. And then we had two other varieties that we wanted to trial. These were ones that we hadn't grown before. One was a commercial variety. I picked up some seed from a company in BC, I believe, and it was Yukimochi, which is a sweet rice, which I don't have any sweet rice in my repertoire. So I thought, well, I'll try this one. And the fourth rice we grew out was from a sport that showed up in our paddies in 2021. It was an exceptional single plant that I harvested and kept out separately, and grew that out this year because the seed was, after a year and a half, almost 2 years in a vase in the dry house, the seed was still completely viable, 100%. So we planted out a couple of flats of that, and it was really quite a beautiful rice variety of its own. And we're interested in working with that one, especially because it has a lot of variability just in its morphology, the way it looks. So we'll be experimenting with that more in the future to see. What I will be selecting for personally is hurricane resistant rice. I guess that looks like short, wind tolerant, is something that's not going to blow over in the hurricanes that we have. Something that is also going to produce lots of seed and the nice fat seed that this variety seems to have. So I will be selecting from, we'll grow that one out next year, and I'll be selecting for plants that are especially nice and lend themselves to some of our developing challenges with climate change. So yeah, any other questions? Let's see. Could you grow?
Sorry, I've got a question just about your selections. In the video you spoke of the awns, the little whiskers. Is that something you would select for or against, and is there a reason?
I mentioned it because it was one of the oddities that showed up in this variety that we're calling NIKIAN 21, because that was the year it popped up in our fields. Awns, would we select for it? I don't know.
I think the awns were actually something the plants developed for self-preservation against predation.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it might be useful. I think birds have a hard time getting at it, but we have not yet had any problem with birds, although because we left the rice in the field trying to find a harvest date where it was dry enough, this year we started to see birds were figuring it out, that there was something really yummy in there. So that may be a matter of they'll just learn over time and become more of a problem for us. So awns may be a good idea. I don't know. I'll see what I think about it in the spring. It would have to be coupled with the characteristics that I find most valuable, and that is quantity and the strength of the plant.
Speaking of hurricane resistance, climate change, the sorts of selections that you're doing, Steph War's question is, were the biblical amounts of rain a help or a hindrance this past season?
No effect.
Yeah.
No effect whatsoever, except, it was a problem getting 3 dry days in a row so that when I combined, I had good dry seed head. Other than that, no, the weather wasn't really it didn't adversely affect the rice as much as for any amount that I could tell. Mainly because it's sitting in its own bathtub. So that, it doesn't, temperatures really didn't affect it. The heat didn't affect it. The paddies can absorb an inordinate amount of water when the plants are growing.
They just thought it was a monsoon.
And, and you can always, reduce your, I maintain my rice paddy water height by using different heights of 4-inch tube that drain. So, if the paddy got too much water, it would just self-bail itself back to the pond, and then the pond would absorb the extra rain.
Oh, that's how you would deal with. Okay, that's interesting. Any effect on disease pressure? Gilbert asks.
Not yet.
These would have experienced that with the rain, I guess. Not so much, eh?
No, I don't think. No, I didn't see any disease issues at all. Pollination maybe on the Hayayuki was maybe not 100%, but that's the case with every variety. You'll have certain certain seed heads that don't fill, but no, not really. No disease pressure yet.
Amazing.
Someone asked about growing fish in the paddy, Hannah. And well, we've considered it, but what do you do when you dry down the paddy? That's a bit of a challenge. We also found when we stocked one of our ponds with fish a few years ago, they were only there for a week, and we had kingfishers and herons.
We had all kinds of visitors.
Yeah. So we fed everybody, and we didn't restock. I don't know. I think that would be a challenge. Oh, Gilbert wants to know how many pounds per acre of nitrogen is needed in a growing season.
I don't know. You'll have to let me do some math. I can't do it in my head. It's I don't think it's a lot. I mean, maybe 100 pounds, maybe 200 pounds. Not a lot. I'm not. I mean, I'm just guessing
acre.
here, but
our paddy's only what, 1/12 of an acre. So,
yeah, it's pretty small.
You know, that just takes a couple of pounds.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing about rice and a lot of the data you get from the International Rice Research Institute and others is that they're using urea, and of course, you know, they put the rice, they put the nitrogen to the rice, but again, you know how much of that is just goes, nitrogen's a gas, so it just goes right back into the atmosphere before the plants actually access it. So I think that's why they use a lot of nitrogen, is because they lose a lot of nitrogen, just like any grain or any cereal that is grown in Nova Scotia. I mean, they pound it with urea and they're only getting about a 40% usage.
We had another question from Calvin, who would like to know if you can also talk a little bit about your seedling germination process.
Oh, that's the fun part. We start in March. We'll decide which varieties we want to grow. We'll do a germination test. So far, we've always had pretty good results, 100% or 90%. Then I will, once I get the greenhouse set up, I'll start planting or seeding. I have trays.
First, you soak it.
I soak the rice in water and until it starts to send out its radicle. Once the radical's out, then I start seeding. I have 128 plug trays that I put 2 seeds per plug with tweezers. And then my trays are 10 years old. They're getting a little bit wonky. So I developed the Ian Curry 128 screws in a piece of plywood, which I just fill a normal seed tray and I just push my tray down, create 128 little divots, and then I just do that and fill my, put in. So I put in about 260 seeds, or maybe a little bit more. Sometimes I get 3 seeds in there, but then I cover them with a light dusting of potting mix, and then I set them in tanks that I have, little 4x8 foot tanks that'll take 16 of these trays, and I water them, and I cover them at night when it goes below freezing, and that's it. They grow. Gilbert helped me one year. I had a lot of problems with fungi and algae, but Gilbert cured that, and now I have no problems with it. I use worm castings and some, I just make up a seed mix, and that's what I fill my trays with, and the rice seems to like it, and then hopefully I'll have good sized seedlings by the 1st of June. It's tedious planting, because if you can figure out 128 times 16 times 4, that's a lot of tweezer work. But it's in a greenhouse and it's warm, so it's okay.
Meditative.
Contemplative.
Yeah. There's a couple of questions about EM. Yuki. Hi, Yuki. Wants to know if you use your EM or bokashi.
I use EM in my water. Anything I'm growing, I will. I always put the EM in my watering cans. That helps the seedlings when you're doing dormancy break. EM is really good for that. That helps a lot. It also helps the plants access the nitrogen much faster, because you've got enough microbes in there to break down any nitrogen that comes out of my mix, and makes it readily available for the rice. The Japanese use EM a lot in their rice paddies, and it really shows.
And sorry, farm is not my first language. What is EM?
EM is a Japanese invention called effective microorganisms. It was developed by a Dr. Higa in Okinawa, and he's found that using it has the EM has about 13 different lactobacilli cultures, as well as some blue or purple. There's purples, and there's some yeast. There's all kinds of stuff in there. You mix it with water and molasses, or with water and molasses to make you expand it and 20 times. So if you have a liter of EM, a liter of molasses, and 18 liters of water, you let that ferment or percolate until you have a pH of 3, and then you can use that for about 90 days, and you can spray it. You can use it for soaking your seeds. That'll make them break their dormancy much faster. I have farmers up in Clarence that are using it now in their seed drills, because when they're seeding, they have a EM mixture, and they coat the seeds as they're planting now, and they're looking forward to an early and good crop this next year. So I've been dealing with EM for about 10 years, and I'm very happy with its results.
Calvin wants to know where to buy EM.
You're looking at it. Well, there's other, you can buy it online. You can buy it from Amazon. You can buy it from Terraganics out of Texas, or you can buy it from SCD out of Missouri. You can buy it from me as an expanded form or as mother culture. So that's how that happens.
And it has other uses.
Oh yes, it was originally developed to help clean up the wastewater treatment systems on the island of Okinawa, and then they realized it was so efficacious that they started using it on other crops. So they use it in Asia. They use it in fish farms. They use it in hog farms. They use it in dairies. They use it in the rice paddies. They make the bokashi, which is a compost, using that in fish meal and other things. So no, it seems to allow the plants to have faster access to the nitrogen that they need, and that's what we're headed for, is less nitrogen and faster growing, or the plants get the nitrogen much quicker, which means in some cases you can mix the EM with urea and ferment it for a few days, and you can cut your nitrogen usage in half. And that's the big thing now with Terraganics, is it's called EM Nitro. And I've got one farmer experimenting with that now, and I'm hoping to see what kind of results he gets. But this is a Brazilian invention, where they were having problem in importing urea, the cost of it, and so they've been playing with it, and there's a very good webinar on the Terraganic site about how they use this EM Nitro, how they make it, and then how they apply it. So it's a pretty amazing product. Anything else?
Related to the EM, I'm not sure if you covered this, but Gilbert was wondering about use after the plants are tillering. I'm not sure if you caught that in your comments.
Well, I think once you've inoculated your paddy, it doesn't hurt. I imagine it helps. It certainly helps with fungal growth. I think Gilbert had really good success with using EM this year, fighting off powdery mildew or fungal problems, because the lactobacillus will build up on the leaves of the plants, and perhaps it helps to dissuade some of the other pathogens from landing or surviving on your plants. But EM's not a fertilizer. It's just a lot of microbes that most of our modern green revolution have destroyed by using synthetic fertilizers.
Is EM a a foliar or a soil application?
Both. You can use it both. You can
Okay.
do soil drench at the beginning of. One of the things I'm looking at is I'm having a few weed issues in the paddies, and so I was doing some reading, and the Terraganics people, they have the same problem in Asia, and what they do say is, well, if you spray your fields with or your paddies with the EM early spring, that's going to accelerate the dormancy of the weed seed so that it sprouts early. Then you can till it back in the ground, and then you can go back with planting your rice. So, and that's just something I've been reading about, and I think that's something I'm going to be trying next spring.
Interesting.
Catherine Winlow is asking about using EM on dryland rice.
Why not?
Yeah, with a compost tea for sure.
Well, all my compost tea is based with an EM, with a certain amount of EM. And EM is really fun because you can, once you've diluted it or expanded it, then you can then dilute it again. So like with a foliar spray or with a compost tea, I'll do a 50-to-1. So I'll do like a 1 liter of expanded EM to 50 liters of water or compost tea and apply it. That's, and it seems to help. It's very versatile, but it's not a fertilizer.
I always have EM spray in the greenhouses when we've had a warm storm come up from the south. It tends to bring all kinds of fungal problems with it. And spraying like the tomatoes and things in the greenhouse, it helps it a lot to just keep those tomatoes going, even if they get a bit of a blight. It does definitely help.
Gilbert could speak to that better than me.
Flora was asking, do you sell your rice, and can you seed organic rice? Is there a lot of rice grown in Canada? And were we affected by the drought in past summers? We do sell our rice, and we're getting a pretty good supply where we can begin to make it more available to the public. So you can just contact us for that. Can you seed any organic rice? I've tried, when we were first starting, I tried growing anything I could buy in a bag, and none of it would really grow because it was polished so much. Once the germ's gone, you can't start that seed. So you really have to get rice in the pretty raw form,
The paddy.
and they call it paddy, which is just rice that has still all the husk on, and that will germinate. So that's a bit of a challenge. Really, I did try growing anything. We are the only ones growing rice in Canada, except for one man in BC who grows his own rice to make sake. And I think Steph found somebody else in BC now growing rice that we don't know anything about. And I had heard a while back that there were some people in southern Ontario growing
Chatham.
rice in Chatham, but we've heard no more about that.
Yeah, it was a Chinese company was hired to come to Chatham to grow rice on old tobacco fields. I don't know, or something down there in Ontario. But it was a news article, a blurb about 3 years ago. I've heard nothing since, like no CBC exposés. But yeah, I mean, you can grow the rice, the Hokkaido rice. You can grow in pretty marginal climate. I mean, Hokkaido's at 45 degrees north and island of Japan. And I talked to Susan McCooch at Cornell about the Hayayuki rice, and she said, well, she's seen Hayayuki seedlings covered in snow that had been planted, it had germinated, and then it had snowed, and she said it never had any adverse effect on the rice whatsoever. But that rice was specifically developed for that latitude. So, yeah, you can grow rice anywhere.
And Flora also wanted to know if we were affected by drought in past summers. Well, our pond certainly went down. It went down by a meter.
Well, 2 meters actually. Back in 2020, it was pretty dry, and I pretty well sucked that pond dry. But I still had enough water in there to keep the plants happy. What the water does, besides trying to cut down on your weed load, the sun warms that water up. And so you'll have 25, 30-degree water when you're, in July and August. I mean, it's just a bathtub in there. And so the rice loves it. And that's when it just really shoots up. I mean, you can watch it from day to day and see how fast it grows. But, it's sitting in a nice warm bathtub with all the nutrients it needs.
But droughts are certainly a concern for the future. I'm sure we're going to experience more and more drought, and water is an issue. We're trying to just use what natural runoff and rainwater we have, and not have to resort to our well water, which it would be kind of counterproductive. So, in considering that, I'm also hoping we can experiment a bit more with growing rice that is not all the time flooded. Flood it maybe 2 or 3 times deeply and then let it dry out, and see if we can develop a rice that, like the upland rice, but with the option of flooding it, that will get rid of weeds and help it cope with a cold night. And yeah. So,
And have you ever tried that before? Or is it a
We
piece
haven't.
for?
Yeah, we haven't done intermittent flooding, drying. It was in our plan for this year, but then when we had a month of rain, we kind of gave up on that idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
We couldn't get it dry.
We're coming close to the end of our hour. It sounds like there's lots of folks who maybe are considering a bit of a rice growing journey for themselves. I just want to put it out there that if you've been sitting on any questions related to like your specific growing situation, your farm, your homestead, and you want to get a question in about that before we adjourn, that you're really welcome to. That's what we're here for. There's no stupid questions. And also, I'm wondering, as people are contemplating that, what kinds of, like, are you guys available for folks who are starting, because you are two of such a small number of people who know anything about growing paddy rice? Are you open to being contacted with questions from growers who get seed from you throughout the season, and how should people go about that?
My email is for the rice. It's just very, very difficult address. It's novascotiarice@gmail.com. And that contacts me directly. If you look at Niki's website on the NIKIAN Gardens website, she has a blog that we ran this summer from the seeding right through to the harvesting. And so there's a lot of information on that, but I love to talk. So, if you want some information, I can give it to you.
Yeah, we'll also supply people with rice seed. We're all about trying to get folks to try growing rice and hopefully have good success and find that it's a really good crop here.
And Niki's blog is on the website at nikiangardens.com. If you're looking for that, that's in the chat. Yeah. Any final questions for Niki and Ian? Any final comments? Nick, oh, here we go. Jessica, how long did it take you to experiment before it was a viable income source for you? What a good question.
It's an excellent question. It's not an income source for us because we're still experimenting. And the, we have, I think I've got a couple 100 kilos of rice in the cellar right now that I'm going to start dehusking, selling it. If people want to buy some rice, they can contact me. I will always keep quite mostly seed, but if people want rice, I can certainly dehusk it for them. We never really went on this experiment to make money as an income source. We really started this just to prove that you could grow rice in Nova Scotia, and that it is a viable grain. And in a cooperative situation, as they have in Asia, it's a good system. It works. Everybody works together. You've got one guy with the combine, one guy with the polisher, and you know, if you grow, once you figure out how much rice that you want to eat, or if you want to go commercial, you know, the sky's the limit. I just love watching YouTube videos on people growing rice in different parts of the world, and how they start their seeds, how they harvest it, how they dehusk it. I mean, it's the Africans use a mortar and pestle. I mean, the Chinese and the Asians, they have a system like ours. Ours is like a little, relatively small commercial machine. I mean, it can certainly dehusk a lot of rice in a very short period of time. And but really, we didn't start out to make money. We just started out to just do an experiment and beat the CFIA into submission.
Yeah, that was a challenge.
Yes, I got a PhD out of that.
Well, and you know, my main concern is food security, and I think rice is an excellent way to bring food production right home into your backyard and make sure you've got something to eat. And people all over the world live on rice and not much else. So I would like to see a lot of people growing rice, and we we just really encourage it. Let's see.
Yeah.
There was another
Yeah,
comment.
there's a question here about kind of upscaling. So you were just talking, you know, people all over the world grow it. They're not all mechanized systems. You can use a mortar and pestle. Maybe before we close, it would be great to hear about some of those options, what you've seen, and when you make the decision to upscale and buy the machine from China, you know?
Well, we started out, we wrote a grant with the Department of Agriculture in 2013. It was an innovation grant, and they gave us some money that allowed us to build some paddies on a side hill and a pond that wouldn't hold water. And we were doing everything by hand. We had help from some friends to harvest. What was Sean and Matoko Tennessee would help us. They'd come and help us harvest. And then I borrowed a thrasher from Hope Seeds that tried to kill me. And I realized that sometimes these homemade threshing machines are kind of dangerous. So we decided to bite the bullet, move our paddies, the paddy system down lower to where the water level was, and then we cobbled together some money to build our paddies, build a pond. We use only pond water. We don't use well water, and then we built the paddies big enough that I'm too old to, spend all day with a sickle harvesting and then beating it on a rock to get the seeds. So that's basically how we got started. And we really haven't increased the size of our paddies. We're just trying to get better at it and finding out where the pitfalls are and where the issues are. Like I said, we're more into experimentation than we are profit.
And we like to eat well.
And we like to eat rice. So
well, there are a couple of just final questions if you guys don't mind hanging on for a minute. One about upland varieties, have you grown them as well? And then Jessica is asking about the Canadian wild rice production, whether that could increase in scale, if you have any kind of opinions or observations on that.
We've never tried growing upland rice. I've seen pictures of people's fields of upland rice and they look so weedy. I think it would be very hard to get a decent harvest from that. I've not tried growing wild rice. Well, I've tried, but I've never had success. And wild rice is a completely different genus, species. It's very, very different. It's just called wild rice because it looks like rice, the final seed that you get from this grassy growth in the ponds. I would love to grow wild rice, but my pond doesn't have enough movement of water.
And I'm not very good in a canoe anymore. And I'm not going to go harvest rice out of a canoe or wild rice.
Yeah, I think we're getting smarter all the time, just perform because we have to. Yes.
Well, I just want to thank you
Okay.
guys so much for your flexibility, your adaptability, and kind of pivoting from the in-person event, which would have been so lovely, to this really nice evening virtual chat. You've been so generous with your knowledge and with your experience. We're going to be sharing this video to everyone who's interested, and hope that, you know, the energy and the enthusiasm for what you've sort of started here is going to spread far and wide, because you make it just a beautiful case for it. So thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, and thank all you folks for your interest. I really appreciate it. It makes it feel like we're actually reaching some people. That's great.
Indeed,
Thanks.
you are. Yep. Okay, thanks everybody for joining, and have a wonderful Wednesday night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Steph.
You're welcome.